So you have multiple pieces of real estate that you use, some for vacation homes, some might be investment properties. And the question in your divorce is, how do we value all of these real estate holdings? And I hate to oversimplify it, but it sort of is all the same. So we're going to appraise the properties. Sometimes people get joint appraisals where each party gets their own appraisal, and then perhaps we have dueling appraisal numbers. That's one way of approaching real estate. But also on investment properties, it's the income that we're deriving from those properties. So we're looking at the property twofold. Well, how much equity are we holding in the property? But also we can't lose sight of how much income are we producing from that property by way of rentals. Art, jewelry, and collectibles. What do we do with these items in a divorce? My first question always is, did you acquire these items prior to the marriage, or were these acquired during the marriage? If they were acquired during the marriage, how were they acquired? Did I receive a diamond bracelet from my grandmother when she passed away? Well, that's an inherited item. Versus, did my husband buy me a diamond bracelet for my birthday? I might argue that's a gift. He might argue in the divorce that it's subject to equitable distribution. These are very complex issues that a lawyer has to help you navigate in a divorce. The same for artwork or a baby grand piano sitting in your house. What's the value of it today? A wine collection? There are independent appraisal companies that can help us value all of these assets during the course of litigation. A retirement account versus an investment account. What do we do in the context of a divorce? A retirement asset becomes a lot simpler. It's from the date we got married until the end date of the marriage, which is typically the date that you filed the complaint for divorce. And there are companies that we use that can value not just how much was invested in that retirement account, but the growth or the losses suffered in that account. And then we divide those accounts by way of a qualified domestic relations order. You'll hear people call them quadros. That is how we divide, for instance, a 401k. An IRA, we divide it the same way. We don't need a quadro, but we divide an IRA the same way. How much was invested during the course of the marriage? We have stock, and we're getting divorced. I have some stock on my side of the equation. I've invested in different publicly traded companies, and my spouse has done the same. What happens in a divorce? We're going to value that asset, keeping in mind that during the course of the litigation or the mediation, that asset is either appreciating or depreciating, and my spouse is along for the ride. So if I have a stock that soars during the course of the divorce, my spouse is on the ride with me with that stock, and my spouse would receive their fair share of that now newly grown stock. Can I do a little divorce planning? What if at the start of my divorce, I sell every stock I own, I then have that money sitting in the bank, and I proceed to spend it during the course of the litigation? Can my spouse argue that I dissipated a marital asset? Yes, dissipation is a term of art in a divorce, or in any case for that matter. My spouse could readily argue that that asset existed the day I filed, and I purposely liquidated it and then spent it during the pendency of the case, and my spouse could ask to be made whole at the conclusion of the case. Stock options. There are many schools of thoughts on stock options, and great minds can differ on how we divide stock options. But in general, we look at what options were granted during the course of the marriage, irrespective of when those stocks actually vest. So if I was granted shares of stock before I filed my complaint for divorce, my spouse is entitled to a share of those stock options when they vest, and even though they could vest after we're actually divorced. The valuation of complex assets is a complex issue. Each asset will be treated differently based on how the asset was acquired, when the asset was acquired, and how we can divide that particular asset. And if you have any questions on how to divide complex assets, you can absolutely call our office, and we're happy to help.